Go ahead.
Hello, I'm here today to talk about invasive plants and animals and microbes. These are the creatures that don't naturally live here but have come here either by intent or by mistake, and they can cause problems. Do we have alien invaders here? Yes, we do. We have lots of them. Some are good, most are not. Some are benign, some are really harmful. Why? Because they can lead to extinctions. They can kill off native plants and animals. What do we need? We need these creatures that have come here to have their natural predators so that their numbers stay in balance. Why are the invasive creatures bad? They can cause extinctions of native plants and animals, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They can hurt the human food supply. That's certainly not good. They can hurt the water supply. That's really important. They can hurt human health. They can hurt plant health and animal health, and they can upset the natural balance. So the first one we'll talk about is kudzu. Kudzu is an interesting plant. Here is a piece of kudzu in early May. It's pretty unimpressive. That's because the vine, and this grows on a vine, has just sprouted. But when we look at what can happen, we can have a whole forest covered with kudzu vines. And can that upset the balance? Absolutely. Where did they come from? They were brought here intentionally from the country of Japan. In Japan, kudzu is used as a food crop. Kudzu vines were planted in the 1930s to prevent erosion. It seemed like a really good idea. But kudzu can grow at a foot a day, and a kudzu vine can overwhelm a tree. It can cover the tree, and it looks like green melted cheese all over the trees. Now, can these be problematic? Yes, they can. Here is a picture of a man standing in front of a tree. That tree is about 7 to 8 feet in diameter. It's a chestnut tree. The chestnut trees were the predominant trees in East Tennessee 100 years ago. Today, there are virtually no chestnuts left. What happened? A blight. A blight is a microbe attack. The blight started around 1900 when logs were imported from Europe that had the microbes on them. Those microbes live in the forest today, and if a chestnut tree starts to grow, it gets about 10 feet high, and the blight then kills it. There are attempts today to grow chestnuts that are resistant to the blight, but it was an ecological disaster. The primary tree of the forest was killed off. It used to be 40 years ago that you could come on to Bays Mountain Park in Kingsport, Tennessee, and see the stumps from the trees. Those stumps have rotted away by now. Now there was another case called the Dutch Elm Blight. The Dutch elm disease was brought to the United States from Holland, and again, logs that were being cut for veneer, like plywood. The Dutch elm disease is spread by a beetle. The beetle had no natural enemies in the United States, and it managed to cause tremendous amount of damage, killing off elm trees all over the eastern United States. That was yesterday. Today we have another problem. We have this. This is a hemlock. Hemlocks are very nice, wonderful trees. They can live 400 to 500 years. But if I turn the branch over, you see all the white spots. What are the white spots? That's the home of the adelgid. It's a tiny little bug. What does it do? It sucks the life out of the hemlock. What can we do about it? Unfortunately, not a lot. There isn't a lot we can do other than putting certain kinds of insecticides onto the ground that the tree will soak up and resist the attack by the adilgid. We can do it. We can save one tree, but can we save a forest? No. We have lots of hemlock trees on Bays Mountain Park. We're going to lose a lot of our hemlock trees. We also have another creature that isn't very big. This is the emerald ash borer. It's kind of a pretty bug. You see it on the fingertip of the person. It's bright green. It looks pretty. Is it pretty? No, it's not. What does it do? It attacks the ash plants, the ash trees. And when we look at what happens, you can see on some, you'll see a hole about 3/8 of an inch across, and that's going under the bark, and you can see what happens. The beetle lays an egg, the egg hatches, the larva eats all of the plant material right under the bark, and that kills the tree. How long does it take to kill the tree? About 2 or 3 years. It's the same story as the adilgids. Very quickly, these little bugs can kill big trees. Now we have some other invasive plants. We have one called a hydrilla. Hydrilla is a plant that is used in home aquariums. It's a nice looking little plant, and as long as it stays in the aquarium, that's fine. But when people drop their aquarium plants out into the natural world, you introduce a plant that shouldn't be there, and it can overtake and overwhelm a watercourse. It's a bad thing. How do they get around? Interestingly enough, they'll get on the feet of a duck as the duck swims and spread from place to place. What does the hydrilla look like? It looks like this. Again, not very big. Doesn't look like it could be a real threat, but it can be. How long have they been around? About 50 years. In 50 years, they've caused lots of problems. Now, are all invasives bad? No. There are some good invasives, and one of them you know very well. Honeybees. Are there natural honeybees? Well, yes, there are honeybees out in nature, but have they always been here? No, they haven't. The honeybees that we know were brought here from Europe by the folks who came from Europe 200 and 300 years ago. They brought their honeybees with them. The native bees do produce honey, but not to the quantity that the honeybee does. So honeybees are a good invasive. And interestingly enough, so are earthworms. During the last ice age, there was thousands of feet of ice over the land to the north of us, up in the Great Lakes area. And those earthworms that had been there, they were crushed. So where did earthworms that are in places like the state of Michigan come from today? They were brought by mistake, but it was a good mistake, by the folks from Europe. We have mosquito fish. It's a tiny little fish. It's about 1.5 inches long. It's growing in Bays Mountain Lake. What do they eat? In mosquito larvae. Are they natural? No. They were introduced. Are they good guys? Oh yeah. We have freshwater jellyfish. They're kind of fun. They're not harmful. They're fun to look at. They're also in Bays Mountain Lake. And we have dandelions. Are dandelions good? Well, they were brought here intentionally because they were a food crop. But it's a case of the food crop that got away. And that often happens, that we have invasives that get out of hand and become wild. Now, are we going to have some future problems? Yes, we are. We've got some problems that are developing. We have something called the thousand canker. it kills walnut trees. And in Sevier County, which is only about 70 miles from here, the canker is killing walnut trees. How do we prevent that from coming here? Don't bring firewood from Sevier County into northeast Tennessee. There is a moth, this doesn't look like much, called the Gypsy Moth. It was a bright idea that didn't work too well. A man in the 1800s decided he was going to grow silkworms in the United States, and he brought the gypsy moth to help do that. Well, he didn't make silk, but he got a lot of gypsy moths. The gypsy moth attacks oak trees, and it can kill an oak tree by eating the leaves. Not just one gypsy moth, but thousands on a single oak tree. How do we prevent the movement of the gypsy moth? Don't move firewood. There is another animal called the Longhorn Beetle. The Longhorn Beetle comes from Asia. It comes from China, Korea, and Japan. It kind of looks pretty. It's not a nice guy. It, like the emerald ash borer, comes in firewood and will attack the trees and kill the trees. So we really don't want these guys. If you see one like this, or if you see an emerald ash borer, go ahead and step on it. We won't miss it. We also have fire ants. Fire ants are a nasty creature. They look like regular ants. They're red. They're not very big. But if you kick a fire ant nest, they'll come charging out and run up your leg if they can do it and bite you. The best thing to do with a fire ant is don't bother it. Unfortunately, the fire ants are moving. They're moving up from the Gulf Coast up north, and they're starting to get into Tennessee. We have Africanized bees. This was another bright idea. Somebody said, gee, what if we can increase the amount of honey that bees produce by bringing in another group of bees? Well, unfortunately, the Africanized bees are very aggressive. Normal honeybees aren't. You can put your hand in a bunch of honeybees and not be stung. These Africanized bees, yeah, they will sting. What do? Don't bother them. How do I know if it's a honeybee or an Africanized bee? Probably the best thing to do is leave them alone. Then we have the stink bug. The stink bug is a creature that we have seen a lot of in East Tennessee in the last couple years. At my house, they like to climb on the bricks on the south-facing part of my house and warm themselves in the winter. Are they bad? Well, yeah, they are. They'll attack fruit trees. They will kill a fruit tree. And if you step on them, they don't smell very nice, hence the name, the stink bug. There is another problem. Sounds like we have nothing but problems. And we do. It's because we have so many people moving around. And when they move around, they sometimes move things that shouldn't be moved. There is a little bitty mussel. It looks like a clam. It's about as big as my fingernail. And you go, well, how can that be a problem? That's a zebra mussel. They come from Russia. The problem with the zebra mussel is that it loves to colonize around the water intakes, and it will choke off the supply of water going into places like the Kingsport water supply. That's not good. They can also upset the balance of the water quality in a lake, such as happened in the Great Lakes. That's not good at all. How do we prevent them from being problems and moving around? Well, wash your boat. If you have a boat that's in the water, it can pick up the larva from the zebra mussel and transport it to a new lake. It's important that the water in the bilge and the outside of the boat be washed off. We also have coyotes. Are coyotes natives? Not really. The coyotes and wolves didn't mix, and so for many, many hundreds of years, coyotes basically lived to the west. Well, we don't have wolves in the wild anymore in the eastern United States. So coyotes have moved in, and turns out they do very well in urban areas. They will kill pets, they upset the balance of nature. It's very bad. We had some ideas that really weren't so good. The escaped invasives. Bradford pear trees. People plant Bradford pears. It's a pretty tree. It lives in my yard. What happens? Birds pick up the pear. They deliberately carry them away. They drop the seeds. The tree grows. In the early spring, we'll see in the forest the Bradford pears. It's not a harmful tree. It's not going to cause big trouble. It's not a highly competitive tree, but it demonstrates how plants can get out of control. What else can get out of control? English ivy and Japanese honeysuckle. These are plants that people buy at the nursery. They plant them, and the plants grow so fast that they manage to get out of control and become real problems. Tree of Heaven. The Tree of Heaven is a plant that folks will put up in urban areas, and it looks a little bit like a walnut, a little bit. And you go, well, that's pretty, except they have a rather rancid odor, and they have a nasty habit. They poison the ground. Oh, but they grow well in urban places. They grow well in a city. And so folks think this is a really great idea. The problem, of course, is that it causes an upset in the balance of all the other plants that will grow where the Tree of Heaven has been planted. Multiflora Roses, another example of a good idea, a garden plant that gets out of control and is released and goes into the natural setting and cause trouble. Then we have privet. Privet is a fairly innocuous looking plant. In the wintertime, late fall and early winter, it will have purple berries on them. And you go, well, that's nice. Well, if you have one today, you will have 5 tomorrow. It's another plant that grows very fast, very aggressively, because it has no natural enemies. It doesn't have something to choose on it. So when we think about problems that come with invasives, we have examples of like the Kudzu Vine, my little bitty piece here that is way smaller than what they'll look like in 2 or 3 months. The Kudzu Vine was a bright idea that really wasn't that bright. And then we have starlings. We had starlings were in the United States were an interesting problem. They are very aggressive. There's millions and millions of them. They will squeeze out the native plants, the native birds, and compete and become a pest. How did they get here? A man in the 1900s decided that the starling was a really pretty bird, and he brought them from Europe. Of course, he didn't bring the things that would keep the population under control, and the result is we have millions and millions of starling. There's one more. We don't have it here yet. We hope we don't. It's called the Asian carp. The Asian carp is a big fish. It can be 20, 30 pounds. They will jump out of the water, which looks fun until one of them jumps out of the water and smacks you with its tail. They destroy the habitat for our native fish. So the Asian carp is a problematic animal. It causes trouble. What can you do? Well, the first thing you can do and the best thing you can do is don't move firewood that hasn't been heat treated. If the firewood hasn't been heat treated, it could have certain nasty insects in it. It could have some of the blight in it. Don't let planted plants from the nursery get out of control. If you can do that, you'll help the natural world immensely. And thank you for your time.